Hello and welcome to another GCSE geography session on the topic of changing cities. This is session 3 and we're going to start looking at our first major UK city case study of Norwich. So this is going to be the city that we use for the developed world, and we're going to compare Norwich to Mexico City, which is in the developing world. So by the end of this session, you should hopefully understand the terms site, situation, function and connectivity, and also be able to apply those terms to Norwich specifically. We're also going to talk about the structure of cities and how urban patterns develop. And again, you'll know what I mean by urban patterns by the end of the session, hopefully, because we're going to do a virtual bus tour, hooray, of Norwich, which maybe you might have done if you've ever caught the bus into the city. So, what I'd like you to do, there's a lot of note taking today for the majority of the session before there's an Ordnance Survey map skills task. The Ordnance Survey map skills task is on 365, so make sure you've got onto the resources there for lesson 3 and you print that off ready. You may need to either print it off in colour in a large section, but if your printer quality is not great, maybe just use an electronic version and see if you can do it from that. So, we're going to be looking at these 4 characteristics of site, situation, connectivity and function. And what I'd like to do is give you a general definition about what those terms and what they mean, but also a Norwich-specific example. So I'd like you to create a mind map, which you're going to add plenty of detail to, and you're going to add general info, including definitions, and specific information about Norwich for each of those 4 sections. Okay, try and use a different colour or a highlighter or something like that for your Norwich-specific information, because if you get a question about Norwich where you want to include specific detail, it'll be ideal if you've got that already kind of pointed out for you for your notes. Okay, so starting at the top, let's look at the site, situation and connectivity. This won't take long and it's 3 sections all on one slide. So the majority of your notes will be pretty much done after the first couple of slides here. I'll explain each of the bits in total. So this map shows you England and Wales, and you can see that Norwich has been pinpointed by the little pointer on the map. So we're located in East Anglia, and a lot of us hopefully should know that that's where we are, but I know some of you might struggle to point Norwich out on a map. I don't know why, it's very, very well known. But the site of Norwich, and this is what a definition of a site in general, so get this down as your generic term. The site describes the actual land upon which a settlement is built. So the particular place where they decided to put Norwich, when they first put Norwich there, that's the site. The physical factors are the most important thing when determining where you're going to place your next settlement. So, for example, physical factors include things like rivers or fertile ground or sheltered areas. So any area that has a physical characteristic which is maybe advantageous or useful to a place to being settled is something where often places are found. So you'll find many cities and towns in the UK are either located near a river or close to a river, but could also be located next to the coast. Okay, so that's site in general. So Norwich's specific detail and specific physical factors are that it was a low crossing point either side of the River Wensum. So the River Wensum, which flows through Norwich, was really the initial kind of reason for settling Norwich there, because it provided a good source of transportation and water resources. But they couldn't just build it anywhere on the Wensum, so they found what was a low crossing point, so somewhere where they could easily build bridges across from one side to the other to expand the settlement out. It was also next to a very big estuary at the time, because believe it or not, sea level was further inland a few hundred years ago. So Norwich actually wasn't that far from the coast, or as far from the coast as it currently is. The land is a very flat floodplain, so the area around Norwich was very rich in fertile alluvium, or essentially river deposits. Now, those river deposits mean that crops could grow really easily, and it was an easy way to grow food to feed the population of Norwich. The bedrock of the city, so what it was built on primarily, is chalk, which is a type of limestone, and again that you can see in the built environment in Norwich, particularly in the older buildings, the medieval buildings, because a deposit found in chalk, or I don't know if you call it a deposit, but an aspect of chalk is actually flint. Flint is found in chalk rock. And a lot of buildings, particularly even in Reefham, are made of local flint, because Reefham also sits on chalk. So the reason we've got lots of flint buildings in Norfolk particularly is that our underlying geology is largely chalk, and flint is found in chalk. You use what's local to you. So there we go. It's built across the Wensum on a low crossing point, near a great estuary, with the sea was further inland, a flat floodplain, rich and fertile for growing crops, and on a chalk base, which provided us not only with building materials, but also provided us with an aquifer, so a store of water that we could tap into. So the situation of Norwich, this in general, what we mean by situation is where is Norwich in relation to what's around it. So Norwich's site is where specifically it was built and what's there. Its situation is where is Norwich in relation to coastal areas, for example, or other settlements, other major places, like important places like London or I'm not going to say Ipswich, I daren't. So London or Colchester or Peterborough or Cambridge, okay? And other maybe settlement features or physical features like rivers. So the situation of Norwich specifically is that it's found near the confluence of the Wensum and the Yare. So where the river Wensum turns into the river Yare is basically where Whitlingham Broad is found. If you've ever gone doing water sports near Whitlingham Broad, so the confluence, which is the meeting point between those two rivers, and the River Yare gives a direct line from Norwich to the North Sea and then out to beyond. So at Great Yarmouth or Great Yare Mouth, you will find access to the major continent of Europe and direct line over, not far from the Netherlands. So Norwich had access, like I say, to the North Sea coast via the River Yare. It also was close to the important town of Thetford, and believe it or not, at one stage Thetford was an incredibly important town. And more recently, it's still within a couple of hours of of London and Cambridge as well. So we can visit sort of very major cities and very important cities in England. So that's Norwich's situation currently. Now it's connectivity. Connectivity in blue is a location's ability to reach and interact with other parts of the country or world. Now, believe it or not, despite most of the rest of the world thinking that Norfolk and Norwich is kind of closed off from society and really hard to get to, we are actually quite well connected to the rest of the country, and also we have the ability to connect to the rest of the world. Okay, so I'll explain myself, because if you think, like, say, Norwich is isolated, you are wrong. It was originally very well linked to London via a Roman road network. Now, more recently, the major road that connects us to London is the A11. So if you get out of Norwich, it's not far before you get to the A11, which goes through Thetford. That will take you into London quite quickly, again, within about 2 hours. Norwich's railway station is also linked to London-Liverpool Street in London, and that takes about 2 hours as well, so you can get to London very, very easily. But also, globally speaking, Norwich's airport is technically international because it goes to Amsterdam, and from Amsterdam, the major airport in Amsterdam is Schiphol Airport, and if you go to Amsterdam Airport, you can then fly to many, many locations around the world. Okay, so Norwich does have decent connectivity, despite what some people might think. Apologies if you can hear plane noise in the background. They seem to be having a party up in the sky above me. It's because Norwich is so well connected, you see. Right, so this gives us our site, situation and connectivity with very specific Norwich-related examples. So I've named rivers, I've named the type of bedrock, I've named local areas, I've named the types of roads that we're near. So you've got specific Norwich information, and I'm hoping that some of that is not new to you, okay? This means that it is easier to refer to Norwich if you get case study detail that's useful in an exam. So that's site, situation and connectivity of Norwich. Now, the last part of our mind map was looking at the function of Norwich. And by the way, if you didn't get all the notes for the last section, please just go back in the PowerPoint and pause the screen. So the function of a settlement is what it does, what its main activities are. And there are very few cities and towns in the developed world that only have one or two functions. Most of them are kind of multi-functional, multifaceted places, and Norwich is no exception. So what this mind map kind of shows you, it illustrates the different functions that you might find in a town or a city, in anywhere really in the earth, on the planet. So some of them, for example, have a strong religious meaning, and places, even small places like Walsingham, are incredibly important in the Catholic community. Some places have markets as their kind of main kind of function, and Norwich again was a very, very important market town or market city, and still has I think it's probably still the largest permanent outdoor market in Europe. So it's a big deal, Norwich there. Um, some aspects of Norwich might mean, some settlements might be industrial. Norwich, believe it or not, does have an industrial past, and you're going to learn about the textile industry a little bit and the fact that it was, pretty good place for making mustard and chocolate. Some places, not Norwich, are major ports or coastal tourist areas. Every major settlement is a place where people live, so residential function. So if people live in Norwich, it's a place where they live. One of the functions is residential. Also, things like administration and governments as well, and also important businesses and industries, as well as road networks. So all of these things we call functions, okay? So Norwich has many of these functions, and we're going to go through some of those specifically. There you go. So I've got other ones there. I mean, mining town. Norwich has never really been a mining town, so that one is not relevant to Norwich, but certainly ticks the market town box, the cultural and religious box. We've got a Norman castle. We've got 2 cathedrals. It's not a port. It has had manufacturing in the past, not so much now, but we still have Startwright shoe factory as well. It does exist in Norwich. It is a route centre for East Anglia and a way to get to other parts of the world. Commercially speaking, we've got lots of retail. One of the top 5 shopping destinations in the country, believe it or not, is Norwich because of its specialist shops as well as shopping centres like Chapelfield and Castle Quarter. Administrative centre, so important places like council offices. Norwich County Council, Norfolk County Council is located in Norwich, as well as Norwich City Council. We've mentioned residential. It is a tourist resort. Norwich Cathedral is the second most visited cathedral after I don't know, whatever. They might totally made that stat up. But like I say, we're not a mining town. So Norwich has a lot of functions, and I'm going to give you some specifics here as well. So what you've got, okay, this is County Hall, which is a pretty ugly, boxy looking building, but located on Trouse Roundabout. You've got cultural heritage, so you've got your 2 cathedrals and the castle, which I've mentioned. I'm hoping you recognise some of these. Aviva is a continental brand. It's a really important insurance company, underwriters, and lots of companies that you may have heard of as insurance companies, not just Aviva, but other really well-known ones like, I don't know, Direct Line, maybe not them, but companies like that are also actually underwritten by Aviva. So they're a big deal. Norwich is kind of a big financial kind of part of the UK. You find lots of streets of Norwich have these terraced houses. Lots of people live in the city, and I did for many years. It's a market town. This is the market I was talking about. And also it's a place where there are transport links. And you can see this transport link is particularly important. This is the Northern Distributor Route, the NDR, which is the northern bypass. And then you've got the southern bypass here, which goes around the southern part of the city. And then you've got a little gap because the NDR dumps you out here, which they will eventually close up at some point in the next decade or so. So you can see that Norwich has a lot of present-day functions that we really, hopefully, know about because we live near here, okay? So now moving on to land use. So your mind map should now be complete and you should have information about site, settlement, situation and connectivity in general, but also, for Norwich specifically, an idea about what function means and some of the functions of Norwich as a city. And now we're going to look at urban patterns or land use models. Now, what I've got here, which looks like a bit of a target, is actually a really good, I say good, a bit outdated now, but a recognisable land use model. This is called the Burgess land use model, named after a chap called Burgess. And he came up with a model that towns and cities and how they grow from the centre kind of outwards. Now, it is outdated. Not a lot of modern areas fit the Burgess model, but actually Norwich does fit it relatively well, even in a rough way. So it's worth kind of using. Before we talk about land use models, just to clarify what land use means. Land use is how the land is being used, what is on it. So if it is houses, the land use is houses. If it is fields, the land use is fields or agricultural. If the land use is woodland, if there's woodland on the land, then it's a woodland, for example. So all of these are different land uses. It is pretty straightforward. And urban land use, which is predominantly buildings, built up areas, it varies depending on where you are in the city. So I'll show you that on the next slide, a map of the city. Each zone, and we divide it into these zones. You can see zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, zone 4. We divide it into zones. They have characteristics and features. And those include the type of house that you might find there or not, the size of the house, how tall the house is, even the types of windows that you might find in the house will be indicative of a certain area that it's associated with, a certain zone. What it's built out of, how good quality it is, the size of the garden, all that sort of stuff, really, really important. But also, what services there are near there. Is there lots of shops? Is there pubs? Is there restaurants? Is there a chippy? Is there a laundrette? Whatever. Okay, so you're going to learn about how Norwich is divided up into different zones and see how well this model applies to Norwich. Again, not 100%, but in certain aspects it does a little bit. So this is Norwich, and I've not included all of Norwich, but the vast majority above the southern bypass. And this also has got, believe it or not, this, which was the NDR when it was completed, but also this dotted line is where the NDR has actually been finished. So this is a slightly outdated map. But the Northern Distributor Road goes all the way around here at the Posick Junction, round to over here near Drayton. So the CBD, that's the first zone, and the CBD stands for Central Business District. Okay, and that's where you find your towns, your shops, your retail, your department stores, and your services. So the CBD is central because it's in the middle. It's full of businesses, and district just means kind of zone. So it's the Central Business District. So this is if you're walking in Norwich, you're going, past Primark, down Gentleman's Walk, Market's on your right, Primark on the left. There's that guy shouting about selling the big issue. Really nice chap, always wears a funny hat. Puppet Man's out in force. Okay, you are in the CBD. You're deeply rooted there. Now look around you. Are there any houses? No. It's loads of buildings, not many of them are houses. So the CBD is really not where you find many places to live. There are some, but very, very few. It's mainly just businesses. So the CBD is followed quite closely by what we call the inner city. Now the inner city is not in the centre, but it's very close to the centre, and that is very much characterised by terraced houses. Terraced houses that were built for people that worked in the CBD or in the city, in sort of maybe factories back in the day. Now the inner city is very, very cramped. There's quite a lot of high density housing, so lots of houses in a short area. So they can be tower blocks or they can be terraced houses. There might be other ones as well, and redevelopment happens too, but this is where you're going to find those typical characteristics. Going out to the next level, you've got what we call the suburbs. So the suburbs or suburban areas are further out from the city, and they've grown as Norwich has grown in size and population, and also as roads have improved and transport networks have improved. But because they're growing outwards, there's a bit more space to go into, and because there's more space, the houses can be bigger, semi-detached, bigger gardens, off-street parking, that sort of stuff. And then finally, you've got your rural-urban fringe. So this is the point at which the city kind of ends and becomes a rural or countryside area. And you can see the buildings kind of tend to stop kind of being anywhere near as clustered together. They tend to be more spread out, or you'll get maybe little villages like Rackheath, for example, which is sort of a bit further out of the city. Now, if Norwich continues to grow or suburbanise, it will then push this ridge, also this outer area, further into the rural urban fringe. But what you tend to find here, where you've got more space, is still the city, but it's not close to the city. It's places that need lots of space. So what you find out in this area is things like airports, and there's Norwich International Airport. You can see here this airport, which links you to Schiphol, is located here. Now, you also find things like out-of-town shopping centres. So if you go a bit further out of Cossey, what you'll do is you'll find, just where my arrow is a bit further, you'll actually find Queen's Hills, but you'll find Longwater Business Park. Okay, so big shops requiring a lot of space, like the Range, like large Sainsbury's, like what's another place there? I want to say M&S Food, but that's not very large, like Pizza Hut and stuff like that. Basically, large areas with big car parks that you can park in for free. So, and golf courses, you'll find lots of golf courses on the sort of perimeter. Sprouston, you come out of Sprouston, there you go, there's Sprouston Golf Course. You can see that little flag. So have a little look and see what other things you might find, like other little flags. And there's a golf course near Cossey as well. You've got the Norfolk Family Golf, and you've got other parts of the city which have these sort of things that require more space, shall we say, because out here there is more space. So CBD, Central Business District, inner city, very, very high density housing, few shops, suburbs, bigger houses, more spread out, bigger gardens, and then your rural urban fringe, big land use, and then spread out little settlements. Okay, so this is Norwich from above. Let's have a look a bit more small scale with our lovely, exciting bus tour. So I've turned up to Norwich Park and Ride. This is the airport park and ride, if you've ever been there. Very, very reasonable. You park for free, you pay for a very cheap ticket, and you don't have to worry about getting stuck in traffic in Norwich. So we've just joined the bus and we're at Norwich Airport Park and Ride. Now, Norwich Airport and the park and ride itself need space. You need a big car park, okay? So this is what we see. The airport is just over the other side of these buildings, okay, behind these trees here. That needs space for the runway, for the planes themselves, for making sure it's safe for air traffic, etc. So big space tells me that I'm in the rural urban fringe, okay? And airports, car park, park and ride sites, Holiday Inn, big hotels, that's the kind of places you'll find around the rural urban fringe. And the reason why, so this is important, why do you find the airport, park and ride sites, Holiday Inn there? Well, a number of reasons. One, there is the space. If you want to build an airport, you don't build an airport in the middle of a city which is busy. You can just, there isn't a room. Okay, but also if you're building something big, it's going to cost you loads of money. So the cheaper the land is, the better. The further away from the town centre, the city centre, the cheaper the land is. So that's fortunate. And also, if you're going to an airport, chances are you've had to drive there. So you need good main roads like the NDR to get you to places nice and fast and efficiently. Okay. So this is Norwich Airport Park and Ride. Now we're on the bus, we've got on, fantastic, and we're making our way into the city. And so we've got passed through sort of the Helsden area, and now we're on to Aylsham Road. And here we've got what's called a shopping parade. And you might recognise, if you take this bus, Kerrison Toys. It's a bit of a local legend area. It's full of really good toys, great toy shop. So what have we got? We're on Aylsham Road in Helsden, which is in the outer suburbs. So what you get and features you find here are often, this is where social or council houses are built. On the right here, these are very typical council houses. This is kind of almost a gateway to the Mile Cross estate, which is social housing. Again, the land is nice and cheap, that's why. You also get shopping parades, which a shopping parade is just a line of shops. Some, chippy normally, maybe like a beautician or a toy shop, or you might get the odd little banking branch, like a hole in the wall, little corner shop, laundrette, that sort of thing. There are green areas. Near here is a place called Slough Bottom Park, which I know sounds funny, and Waterloo Park. They're both very close. So because, again, there's the space, a space to provide a park and a nice green environment. So, again, the land is a bit more expensive, but it's still on the cheaper side. You're still not right in the middle of the city. And the space, you don't need to build an airport, but you still need space for a park, for example, or maybe a shopping parade. But also, the land being cheap means that if you're a council and you want to cut back on the money you're spending, it's cheaper to build your council houses there than it is in a tight area in the middle of the city. So there's more space for parks, and there's services. You need these services because a lot of the residents, particularly in social housing areas, don't necessarily have a private car, don't drive, and therefore they'll need local services that they can access easily without having to go all the way out to like Longwater or all the way into the city to some of the shops there. So there you go, this is the outer suburbs, very typical kind of environment. Now we're going to carry on our lovely bus journey down Aylsham Road, and here we are in Upper Helsden. So we've followed Aylsham Road and we're further into the city, and this is the inner suburbs. Now the inner suburbs, still not really in the middle of the city centre, and I'm hoping that you can see that space is the main thing here. So what we've got is Victorian houses. These bay windows, and remember I talked about type of window, these windows are typical of the Victorian kind of era, and you will find these in the suburbs because during that era was when actually towns and cities started to kind of expand into the suburb area, so out of the inner city. So the classic kind of bay windows are what you're looking out for here. There's still shopping parades. You've got Domino's down here to the left-hand side. There's like a little co-op around the corner. So there's still services for local residents. But what we've got now are wide pavements not so many green areas and parks. We've got wide pavements so people can still walk, and you've got maybe some small front gardens. These people have got like a little bush just outside the front of their house, little front garden, a bit of green space to match their house. Some of these houses obviously are semi-detached. You've got the odd detached one maybe, but most of them are attached or semi-detached, or like terraced, sorry. So again, going around Aylsham Road, going down this area, you can see that the wide pavements, bit of green space, but it's starting to get a bit more built up. Okay, we're going to carry on our journey on our bus. I've given reasons. So again, less space to build, so the houses are a bit close together. Land is becoming more expensive. Services are still needed because people still live there and still need to walk to them. So that explains why these are all here. So onward. This is actually, believe it or not, where the street I used to live in. So if you go down the road a little bit and around the corner, you'll find you are in the inner city. So this is Silver Street in Norwich, and this is characterised by, in the inner city, this is characterised by high density housing, or these are terraced houses. Houses built in a nice long row, okay, house after house after house after house. There's not the space for off-street parking, so people park on the street and you can see cars parked either side of the road on the pavement, all up the pavement. Permit parking as well here. There's either no or very, very small front gardens. This is not really a garden. This is just literally like open your door onto the pavement, open your door onto the pavement. There's a couple of bushes to make it look as though there's gardens, but they're not really there. Rather than shopping parades, you tend to get more things like corner shops. So this end of Silver Street, which is close to a local pub called the Leopard, this is a fish and chip shop. Great chips there if you get a chance. They're really nice people in there too. And round the other end of Silver Street, you can't see it, there's a corner shop, little convenience store for your milk and your bread and your scratch cards. So this is very typical kind of inner city area. The pavements are more narrow, there's less trees, there's less green space. Now, the reason is because space is at a bit of a premium and it costs more money. So houses are smaller. These ones are put together by often factory owners back in the day. So these were built sort of during the Industrial Revolution largely because people that walked to work, they had to be close to the thing because no one the city and where the jobs were, because no one drove, they didn't have cars, or few people did anyway. So they were close to the city and we wanted to build them cheap. So they built the workers cheap houses, small, not very big, 2 up, 2 down in a nice long easy row. Okay, so there we go. And roads, they're not as a big a deal because not so many people drove. So these roads have just developed as our driving habits have developed. Okay, now we're moving into the CBD. So this is Tombland, and I'm hoping a few people recognise some of these buildings. Some historic buildings here in Tombland. This is what's often known as the Samson and Delilah building, and that's been lots of things in its time, a club at one stage and a lobster place. You've got the Maid's Head Hotel, nice historic hotel in Norwich, and you've got some of the other buildings as well with these lovely oak beams. This is where they used to have there's lots of good ghost stories actually around here of people that died of the plague, and a girl in this building ate her family because they locked them in because she had the plague. It was pretty horrible stuff anyway. So this is Tombland. Now it's the CBD, Central Business District, and if you look around you can see why. There aren't really houses here. There is a business, shops, a pub, a curry house, etc. Okay, behind me here in this direction is a cathedral. So there's not really any residential housing, okay, for people. It's got historic buildings. You can see the beams there. Okay, those historic buildings are here. You've got the cathedral over here, which was in Norwich back in the 1300s as well. So it's really, really old building, and you've got a variety of shops. But the buildings you'll also notice are getting taller and bigger, and that's because it's cheaper to kind of build up than it is to build out. There isn't the space to build out, but also, building up is kind of your only way to maximize your space, because you only take up the same plot of land, you're just increasing the height. So you'll find 3-story buildings, 4-story, 5-story, sometimes tower block buildings as well. So less space to build, land is more expensive, but also the central area or the central business district means that everyone, have you heard the expression, all roads lead to Rome? Well, all roads that go into Norwich converge in this area. So Tombland and the city centre are where you find your businesses, because that's where all people want to be getting to do their things, go to work, get their stuff, have their entertainment, etc. So I hope you enjoyed our lovely bus tour of Norwich. What I haven't shown you is I haven't shown you tower blocks, and there are a few tower blocks in inner city Norwich. There aren't many, because Norwich isn't a hugely populated area, but we will talk about some of those areas in later sessions. Okay, so this hopefully is kind of, I've picked the route that you're most likely to follow if you live in Reetham, and hopefully you'll recognise some of these areas. So what I'd like you to do is, based on what we've seen and based on some of the information that follows, which I'm going to just present to you and then not really say much, just to help you fill out this table, I'd like you to try and complete a bit of a characteristics table, a land use table for Norwich, for these factors. So for the CBD, the inner city, the suburbs, I've put inner and outer together there, and the rural urban fringe, I'd like you to try and figure out as much as you can the age of housing, the density of buildings, the functions and land uses that you can see, and the environmental quality. Is it going to be noisy? Is there going to be air pollution? Is there lots of green space? Okay, I've done some of it for you. Other parts of it you can fill in fairly easily, I imagine. But what I'm also going to do to help you is, once you've got this information down that I've provided and you've got this structure ready, I'm just going to roll on a few slides, and you can pause at each one and add any detail to help fill the gaps. Okay, so pause the screen, get this done ready in your notes, give yourself plenty of space to complete it, and then when you're ready, unpause the screen and I'll give you some more information. Okay, so if you needed more information about the CBD, I'm just going to project it on here for you. Again, I'm going to ask you to pause the screen while you take any information to help you fill in your CBD detail. And then when you're ready, unpause the screen. Okay, inner city, if you wanted a bit more information about the inner city, here is just some images to help you as well and some more information. So pause the screen, see if this helps you fill in a bit more detail about the inner city areas. Okay, a bit more information about the inner city, because that didn't give you loads. Again, pause the screen, use a lot of this information to, again, help fill in those blanks that you might have, but read through it all. Okay, and I'm going to move on to this one, the suburbs. Again, I've got some dates of housing here, so if you're unsure about age of houses, etc., some features, read through lots of this information, and again, complete the rest of your table for the suburbs area. And then finally, the I haven't covered the rural urban fringe because I've done that, as much of that as I can. Hang on, let's go back. Just gonna press this button. What did I do for the rural urban fringe for you? There you go. Not a lot, but I'm sure you can pick it up. Age of housing, not really relevant for the rural urban fringe. Density of buildings, very, very sparsely kind of spread. And environmental quality depends. If you're near an airport, not great. But if you've got a golf course, retail parks, it might vary slightly. But there's not a lot of kind of noise pollution or air pollution. It's largely green space, mainly open areas. So hopefully, I'll go back to this one so you've got a chance just to finish your table. This little section just gives you an idea about something else that I want to be mentioning to you in case it comes up. So it's not in the specification, but it has appeared in lessons, in exam papers. So I just don't want you to be caught out. This is just talking about settlement patterns. So a settlement pattern just essentially means if you were to fly above a city or a town, what sort of pattern would you see? Now, you've got 4 types of settlement pattern. Linear means along a line in either a road or a valley or a coastline. Dispersed means spread out, isolated, like steep areas or farmland areas. Nucleated, and Norwich is a nucleated settlement, means built kind of around a central point, in Norwich's case the Norman Castle. And planned, so you might find that there's clearly little patches of squares and grids and stuff like that. So linear, dispersed, nucleated, planned. All I'd like you to do is just read this slide, make sure that you can sort of spot those patterns on a map, because a map skills activity is often going to appear in your exam. I will guarantee there will be Ordnance Survey map skills required for your exam, at least one of them. And we're actually going to move on to the final task of today's lesson, which is going to utilise the OS Map resource on 365, which hopefully you've downloaded. So we'll finish with that. This sheet is there for you, and there are 4 kind of tasks I'd like you to do. to complete this handout. This is obviously an OS map of Norwich, not all of Norwich, but a big part of Norwich. And I'd like you to just complete those different activities so you can brush up on your Ordnance Survey map skills. I'm going to go through the answers in a minute just to help you. So, but I really want you to pause the screen, attempt that by yourself. It's really important OS map skills, and then I'll go through the answers for you very, very shortly. Okay, so what I'd like to do is just go through and highlight the inner city areas for you. So there's a couple there. I've put circles around them. I've zoomed in as well to these patches so you can see what we're looking for. These straight lines here, they are terraced houses. They are rows of terraced houses, and these little white squares are all their tiny little back gardens, okay, which back onto each other in this gridiron pattern. Sorry, moving on. Get rid of you, go away, thank you. So the next part, this is suburban or semi-detached houses, and again I've circled a couple of areas here and here which aren't grid patterns. You can see they're in like a planned pattern. There's corners, they've got long gardens, bigger white bits. The houses aren't in long lines. There's a few this is semi-detached look, 2 gardens, front and back gardens with houses close together. Okay, very typical semi-detached stuff. And again, there's other examples. Dussendale Park in Thorpe St Andrew, another good example of a suburban area. So they tend to be further out of the city. Next thing I asked you to spot was in the CBD, evidence that tells you it's the CBD. So in this grid square, okay, this is the grid square we're looking at, it's got the castle, which is at 232085, and the cathedral as well, which is here at 235089. Tourist information's there. That's another big clue that it's a central business district. It's actually slightly out there. It's here. The buildings are large buildings, suggest that an inner city or CBD area, and it's surrounded by a ring road. You can see there's a ring road that goes all the way around the city of Norwich, the CBD area. So there's lots and lots of evidence that tells us this is the CBD. You know, I even mentioned the train station, which goes there as well. Okay. Now, this area here is kind of a rural urban fringe area, and you've got a business park and a large hospital site. So this and Green Lane, so this area is essentially the rural urban fringe, which requires more space. So plenty of space to expand as well. There's room to move into. Land is cheap, so it makes expansion more cost effective. And there's good access to major roads, the A47. So that will help you with the sort of final part of the one of the questions on your handout as well. So you've got the A47 here, and even now the NDR as well, which kind of joins up from here, goes around the city. Okay, so hopefully that's helped you a little bit. Now the last thing is just talking you through how to do 6-figure grid references. Now I'm going to take 5 or so minutes just to talk through this because it's a really, really important skill. And I know this has been a really long session with lots of note taking, but it does require a lot of input. So when you're doing 6-figure grid references, you should notice on any map you've got numbers that go across the bottom and numbers that go up the side. Now they will always be 2 figures, okay? So if you've got 2 figures from the bottom and 2 figures from the side to get your kind of 4-figure grid reference, you might say, well, how do I get 6 figures? If you know, you can just stop the PowerPoint presentation right now and just end. But if you're not sure, you need to have an explanation because this will likely appear in an exam. So if I'm looking at this line here, everything along that line is starting with 2, 6. So my grid reference anywhere on that line I've written is drawn as 2, 6. But if I wanted to add an extra little section to it, I need to go imaginarily 8 bits across. Now you can see actually some maps have these helpful little blocks that tell you where the little points are. So if you again imagine this line, it's still in the main grid square of 2, 6, but this is 2, 6, like almost 2, 6.1. So 2, 6, 1. This is 2, 6, 2. 263, 264, 265, 266, 267. This, anything on this line is 268. All right? Now, if I get to this point, it's no longer 26. It goes from 268 to 269, and then we're at 270. So 270 is the 6-figure reference for that line. This one is 260. So it's essentially the first two digits and the fourth and fifth digits of a six-figure reference are given to you by here and the side. The extra third digit on both, okay, the 8 and the 4 in this case, are taken from, and you can estimate, and that's fine, estimated from how far across that grid square it is. So this is like 26.8. If you imagine this was a number line, okay, and I put a thing there, what's that? You'd say it's 26.8. You just take away the point, so it's 268. That's it, okay? So once you've got 268, okay, you then pick the next figure, so 11, so it's 114, so that's 110, and this time, rather than counting across, we count up. And we know we count up, okay, because going this way goes down to 10. So we always count up because these are called northings, and north is upwards. So again, it's got these handy little things that will help us. So we want to go, that's 110, 111, 112, 113, and 114. Now, where those two lines cross over, 268 here, 114 here, is very nicely situated on this symbol, which looks like a pint glass, an old-fashioned pint glass, and that's the symbol for a public house or a pub. So I'm glad I picked that one, obviously, because you need to learn that. But 268, 114, and then where they cross over is important. Now, the first three digits will always refer to the numbers on the bottom, the eastings. The second three digits will always refer to the numbers up the side, the northings. So just make a note of this. Look at these steps, step 1, step 2, etc. And then practice this as much as you can, because you will need to understand how to do this for an exam. Even if it's just for 1 or 2 marks, they're worth getting because many people will get them. Okay, so where they meet is the location. We've already pointed that out. This has been a really long session, and it's very important that you've identified map skills, but also settlement patterns and lots of detail about Norwich in general. I don't think any of the stuff you've covered today has been really, really hard, but I think there has been a lot of it. So very well done for listening, very well done for bearing with me, and well done for getting through it, and I will see you next time.